the more things change, the more they seem to be the same. Even thousands of years ago, we were already talking about societal issues that kind of correlate with issues we still have. There's a lot of lessons to be learned from old mythology and old stories that we would like, that we could use today, especially when talking about AI, and there seems to be some kind of uncanny reliance, some kind of uncanny overlap between AI and concepts such as black boxes, or even more bigger societal issues as infrastructure and capture, that kind of resemble a lot of what Greek mythology was talking about years ago. And the more research I did into AI and in mythology, the more overlap I saw. So in this video, I kind of want to note down and talk about the overlap between mythology and AI, especially Greek mythology. So, one of the stories that's more oftenly referred to when talking about the gods, mythology, is the story of Prometheus, which is a titan that helped Zeus conquer Mount Olympus. And as a reward, he was in charge of creating all living beings. This included animals, and this also included humans, which he shaped in the face of the gods. It's a kind of a reward and respect towards the gods. Now, Zeus liked this, but Zeus didn't want the humans to outgrow the gods, as they had the potential to do so. And he saw them as inferior and sub-sentient creatures. So he did not allow the humans to have one important tool, which is fire. Because fire would allow them to cook, and to bake and to create and to melt steel, and eventually outgrow and develop past the abilities of the gods. So Prometheus, being angry of this, because he wanted his humans to flourish as much as he can, stole fire from the gods and brought it to the humans. And the story, of course, continues where Zeus punished Prometheus. But I think here the analogy can already be taken towards AI, where we as humans have created AI, and in this case the fire would be consciousness. Because once AI has consciousness, it has the possibility to think for itself and outgrow as humans and create all sorts of things without us, and therefore wouldn't have a need for us again. Kind of like how humans wouldn't have a need for the gods when they were exposed to fire. This also correlates with Marx's theory about hidden labor and hidden costs, as a tool is never just a tool, right? Fire is never just fire. It allows you to grow and create and outshine others. And in the same way, AI could be a tool that we use right now. And a lot of people defend AI by saying, hey, this is just a tool which could help us work better. But there's hidden costs here that punish us in a way, as maybe we are not using it just as a tool, maybe we're using it as a replacement. Instead of focusing and noticing the imperfections, we are working towards a perfect frame or perfect framework for the machine rather than for us humans. This is also what Parika said. And this hidden labor, there's just a cost to creating it using AI. The second story that comes to mind is the story of Proteus. And Proteus is this transforming being which was able to shapeshift into any form he wanted. A tree, the water, a snake. He's portrayed as many different forms and always transforming. And in mythology, he was portrayed as almost impossible to capture, as he would always transfigure and transform into different beings, which would make it just impossible to grasp the concept of him, because he's always changing, ever changing. But if you managed to hold on, well transfigured and transformed, you would ask him one question about the world. I was reminded of this story by Masfita Charmuta in the MLST podcast, where she relates this concept to the understanding of our brain. Because as we research our brain with our limited understanding, we can get a small glimpse of understanding of how the brain really works. But it's always truly just a snapshot or a capture of what really is known about our current existence. Because in years of more study, we'll realize that the concept we've learned now is not really relevant anymore, because we only see a small framework of what we understand. And this reminded me a lot of Philip Agre's work on capture, where you can capture a moment, a snapshot, but then it will inevitably change in the future. You can only capture a moment in time, maybe with a picture, but it will never truly understand what's going on in a situation. So if you look at the world wars, like pictures, you're never going to understand the emotions and the grasp of the true moment. The capture does not fully encapture feeling and humanity. And in regards to AI, this reminded me a lot of black box thinking, where AI is seen as this understanding huge topic, and you can try to pin down the topic of AI and create laws about it or create more information about it, look up how the entirety works. But by the time you've done that or you've researched it, it will have already changed to something completely different, as it's always transforming and always growing, and always a new version of AI comes out, that it becomes impossible to grasp the true nature of how AI truly works or how a model develops. And this black box, where you can maybe glimpse in if you try hard enough, essentially tells us nothing, and it's way too complex to understand. Kind of like Proteus, I think, because it's just changing. Okay, so the last story I want to talk about is the story of Arachne. And Arachne you might recognize from arachnophobia, fear of spiders. But in Greek mythology, she was actually a Greek woman, an ancient Greek woman, that was very well known for her beautiful tapestries. And these tapestries were so beautiful that they even challenged the beauty of the gods. Which is why Athena came down to their village, and out of jealousy and curiosity, she challenged Arachne to a duel to create the most beautiful tapestry. And where Arachne initially stumbled and held back, she then accepted this duel, and they both started weaving the most beautiful tapestries they could. And Athena created undoubtedly beautiful pieces, depicting the gods as beautiful beings, and as honored Poseidon weaving his waters, Zeus striking down his thunderbolts. Well, Arachne made even more beautiful tapestries, but putting the gods in a bad light. So being critic of the gods and their power, and kind of fighting against the idea of suppression by the people, by the gods. And in the end, undoubtedly Arachne's tapestries were more beautiful, and this angered Athena, because the tapestries that put the gods in a bad light were chosen as the more beautiful ones. And as punishment, Athena turned Arachne into the first spider, which is the mother of all spiders. And this one has a lot of views that correlate with AI and things we talk about today, which I think is super interesting. So you could initially relate it to image generation, where AI can create the theoretical perfect best picture, but in this case, say you would portray the perfect picture of the gods, it's not a true capture of what it is really like to live in that time. So this relates back to the concept of capture as well. But I also like the analogy of AI being Arachne, where we are Arachne, where we can create beautiful things that have imperfections, and they don't show the gods as this beautiful being, or AI as a beautiful being, but actually show the imperfections of life and of the gods and of AI. And those imperfections, kind of what Walter Benjamin talks about, or Hoole, like, they create beauty, and the beauty is in the imperfection. And the small things that make things less perfect is what makes us human and better than the perfect framing of the gods, or in this case Athena creating her perfect tapestries. There's also another way you can look at it, where we have created the being that created AI. Say we are the gods. That links back to Prometheus. And we have created these humans, and then in our case we created AI. And then at some point AI turns against us while creating undoubtedly better results than humans ever could. It now looks back at humanity as cruel and imperfect. And we want to punish AI in a way that that Athena would punish Arachne. We want to send it back and block it out in a way. So a lot of these concepts that I talk about with mythology, they correlate to the same opening point that I had, which is the more things change, the more things stay the same. And we're not the first people that encountered this. When the internet came along, everyone thought that was going to change the world. And in a way it did. But it was the same for the printing press and industrial revolution, which were all huge turning points in the existence of the human race. But in the end, the concepts that we're talking about, they've been there for thousands of years. In Greek mythology, these stories, they communicate the same points. And much like the story of Proteus, like, things are ever changing, but there are lessons we can learn from this, and especially in these old stories, there's so much to find there and take from, and then apply to things like AI. And we can take the concept of infrastructure and capture, and then see what we can learn from them in the lens of old Greek mythology. I'm sure many other stories point out the same things, especially in Greek mythology, which we are talking about today. And I can't help but wonder, what other lessons are there that we can learn from our history and our past? And especially these analogies of mythology are very striking to keep in mind. So maybe it is true that things are ever changing, but on the other hand, they do stay the same.